So you want to get started in rental arbitrage, but you don't know what kind of property you should get. Well, that's a valid concern. We have houses and apartments, and each one has its own pros and cons, which I will get into in this video. So if we're starting off with houses, there's a few key advantages that houses offer that apartments don't, and vice versa. The biggest thing with houses is that they offer a larger opportunity for higher profit margins. And that's just simply by design, that they are larger spaces so that they can accommodate more people per night, larger groups. Apartments typically don't have as much space. Apartments will usually be either had in a one-bedroom or studio flavor. At least that's what my portfolio contains. I usually stay away from the 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms because they don't offer that much of an advantage that a 4 or 5 bedroom house can't do at the same time. So profitability would be one of the main factors that would be in favor towards houses. The other thing is versatility. So what I mean by that is a house can pretty much do anything that a apartment can do, but more. So meaning in terms of sleeping a 1-person, 2-person, or 8-9 person reservation in one night, it can do all of those. An apartment cannot, obviously, especially if you're dealing with a studio, right? So that comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. One of them being, since it allows for larger groups, you have a higher likelihood of parties happening, because people typically don't want to put stuff 15 people in a 1-bedroom apartment. It's probably not gonna make for a nice party. People want some space. So that is one of the risks you run with a larger house, is that you do have a higher potential for parties. Houses usually also have more than 1 bathroom. This is a plus. And when you have larger groups, people don't want to be waiting on using the bathroom. Your apartments will usually have 1 bathroom, which is completely okay for 1 or 2 people staying. But once that group gets larger to about 5, 6, 7 people, you don't want to have that many people using 1 bathroom. It's just not convenient. The other thing with houses is that they're usually easier to negotiate with your landlord. The landlords for houses will be typically looking for a longer lease, or well, the most that I've run into are usually favoring longer leases, usually in the form of a 1-year minimum, preferably 2. Sometimes you can get a 3-year lease depending on the situation. Landlords are usually easier to deal with than apartment buildings because you are speaking directly with the decision maker. It's less cumbersome to negotiate front-end lease concessions such as free rent, reduced or 0 security deposit, because you have a direct line of communication with the landlord. Whereas with apartments, usually if they're a larger apartment building, they'll be managed by some property management company. So apartment buildings will usually have more complicated staff structure where you'll be speaking with the leasing agent at first, and then the leasing agent will then be communicating with their property manager, and then the property manager has to speak with the regional manager, and it's just this whole chain that's kind of like playing that game telephone, where you tell the leasing agent one thing, it turns into a completely different thing by the time it reaches the decision maker within that chain. So it's a little bit more cumbersome with apartments in that sense, a little bit trickier to negotiate, especially when we're talking about front-end lease concessions. Houses do have that advantage in that regard. Now, some of the advantages that apartments have, one of the big ones is on-site maintenance. So this is especially important when you're first starting out. If you haven't quite built out your team yet, and that usually consists of cleaners and your handyman, your lawn care team, things of that nature. If you haven't built out a complete comprehensive team yet, then having on-site building maintenance will be huge, because repairs can get expensive. And one of the great things about apartments is that when you have on-site maintenance, fixing a simple issue could be as simple as putting in the work order on their online portal, and they'll send out their handyman or their on-site technician to deal with it, whether it be a toilet that's not flushing properly, or a garbage disposal that's either malfunctioning or no longer has power. Simple things like this can get quite costly when you're dealing with houses, not only in sending someone out, but also replacing the parts. Whereas with an apartment building, you just put in a work order and they send out their person to fix it. That comes usually as expected with the lease. Apartments are also typically easier to clean since they are smaller by nature. Usually your 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms, there's not much, right? There's only a kitchen, a living space, and the bedroom and bathroom. Whereas with a house, you have all of those same spaces. However, now your bedrooms are multiplied by 3, 4, 5 times the amount of work that would be needed for a 1-bedroom or studio apartment. So this is going to be easier for your cleaners to turn over an apartment or a studio in a timely manner compared to houses. The other thing is if you have more than one apartment, especially in the same complex, it's easier for your cleaners to get from one unit to the other. So they can get a lot more done within the same area than they can with a house. Because if they need to clean more than one house, there's not much they can do but leave the house and drive to the next house, right? So cleaning efficiency when goes to the apartments. You know, once your cleaners are done with one house, they're going to have to drive to another house if they're assigned more than one house for the day. So with the apartments, it's a lot easier for your cleaner to get from one unit to the other. Apartments are also easier to stock with amenities. Things like, you know, not only your furnishings, but your kitchen items, your cups, your forks, spoons, just everything, your coffee maker, everything you need within the space. It's easier to do with an apartment just because there's less to put in there. Again, with the houses, you're gonna have to multiply that number by several times usually to get everything that you need, whether it be beds, bed frames, nightstands, lamps, things of that nature. Apartments are also cheaper in terms of not only monthly rent, but also utilities. Okay, so since it's a smaller space, it'll be a little bit more energy efficient when it comes to summertime cooling and also wintertime heating. Your bill shouldn't be that high as compared to a house of much larger size. The other great thing about apartments is that you typically can share an internet connection if they are close enough to each other. If you have internet at one apartment, then you can usually have the unit next door or even straight on top share that same internet connection. You can't do that with houses. So those are just some of the basic pros and cons to getting a house or an apartment and what the advantages, what the disadvantages are for each. So hopefully that helps. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to click like and subscribe, and I will see you guys later.